Yeah, it's been
40 degrees, it's warmer here, I think.
what's that? I'm sorry.
I think it's warmer here.
Isn't that wild?
Oh, we're live. Okay, good. All right.
Yay! Okay.
Yay, here we go. Let me do gallery view so we can see. Okay, I don't see it on anyway, all right. Hopefully we are recording here on Facebook. My name is Patty. I am the owner of the Breastfeeding Shop. It's not showing up on Facebook quite yet, so maybe it's just a delay. And here we have Ashley Gorgon Coppola. She is an international board certified IBCLC. I love your sign in the back, by the way. That's very cute. And Motif Medical. They're a new breast pump company on the market that we are starting to see really good results from. But she's from Knoxville, Tennessee, and you own Genesis Lactation, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Tell us about that. Yeah.
So Genesis Lactation was kind of born while I was nursing my little one on the couch. I had been working for WIC, which is supplemental nutrition for women, infant, and children, and had been getting breastfeeding education through them. And my end goal was to be an IBCLC. And I have my little girl, and I'm nursing her, and we've had our own obstacles and things. And I'm the type that, even though I'm a stay-at-home mom at that point, I still can't sit still. I need to utilize everything and put something into action. And so I started just small little breastfeeding groups and a monthly breastfeeding class. And then as the months went by, it just grew and grew and developed and evolved. And it's still evolving every year. It's just a little bit different from the year past. So
Nice.
I've now been with Motif Medical for about a year now. And so getting to travel and meet other people around the country and around the world. We had an international convention last year. So getting to see what other people are looking for from a pump company and be able to apply that to Motif so that we can better reach, from a medical perspective, reach pumping needs for our moms.
Oh, that's great. When did you start? When did you get your IBCLC? You said 2014 or 15, so you've been...
I was actually a CLC at the time, which is very similar and kind of confusing. A CLC is a certified lactation counselor, but it does not reflect any educational background. So it was going towards IBCLC, which I eventually got in late 2017.
Oh, very nice. Congratulations. That's wonderful. It's a great cause and great thing to do to help these moms. And I love the fact that, we're seeing so much more breastfeeding. I had 2 children myself, and I loved every minute of it. So, and there's so many more resources now, which is fantastic. But I wanted to, as the Breastfeeding Shop, we sit here through this kind of crazy time right now. I was thinking, how can I be useful to the moms? We're all stuck at home, and how can I kind of create this community? And, I know a lot of us have questions about breastfeeding, and just, certain things always come up on the phone for us. So I thought it was a good opportunity to start doing these live Facebook videos to maybe partner with lactation consultants and having some questions asked. So if anybody's listening, which I do see there are some viewers out there, please ask your questions in the comment section, and I'll read them out loud. And then Ashley will go ahead and answer the questions. But as well as, if we don't get to them because it is a little bit delayed, we'll circle back around at the end tomorrow and answer the questions. But please use this time, share with your friends. My goal is to do these once a week. But I wanted to, I guess let's start off with how do we know if the baby's getting a good latch? Because with my first son, as we were talking a little bit before, I'm like, what are you doing? I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you want to do. I don't know how to do this. Am I confused? Are you confused? And, it was really stressful.
Right. Oh, you're frozen on
and a lactation consultant came into the hospital and kind of just popped her finger in, and the baby latched. Yep. With the second baby, he just kind of figured out what to do. But, can you help maybe talk about, those first few days about how do you know the baby's latching correctly and all that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for, setting up this platform too, because I think it's absolutely incredible to be able to kind of give back during this, especially during this time. I love it anyway, to maybe reach out to people who don't know this type of resource even exists, but especially during this time when breastfeeding is so crucial for the immune system. And then grocery stores are, not as accessible to get formula. So this is kind of a really big need right now,
Yeah.
to make things more successful and attainable for the breastfeeding mom and the baby. So to answer your question, as far as how do you achieve a good latch and how do you know the latch is good? A lot of people automatically think of pain. And sometimes a latch cannot be that great and no pain be associated with it. So it's not the only telltale sign of whether or not there's pain involved or not. But definitely if there is pain involved, that is almost always an indicator that the latch is not great. A latch should be almost totally encompassing the whole front of the nipple and the areola or areola, however you want to pronounce it, around the nipple area. Those are going to be differing in sizes from woman to woman. I've seen very large areolas. I've seen very small ones. The whole thing does not need to be in the baby's mouth, but a good section of it. It's breastfeeding, not nipple feeding. And so if baby's only on the nipple and clamping down, that's very painful. That's very painful.
Yes, I remember.
Some of us have probably witnessed that and can testify. But a good latch is asymmetrical. And a lot of people look at me funny when I say that, but it shouldn't be right on top of the nipple. I'm going to use all my things are in my office right now, so I don't have my things with me to teach. That if this is the nipple and this is baby's mouth, we don't want them coming in straight on top of the nipple. We almost want them to kind of come in from an angle. Usually it's the bottom, just depending on how you're holding baby. So if they're being held in that typical kind of cradle position, they're coming in from the bottom so that the nipple is going up and above the tongue towards the palate of the mouth and not getting stuck right in front of that tongue. And that ends up being like a clamping, chomping motion that hurts. So a good latch is asymmetrical. Nose to nip almost is how you want to position baby to kind of make that more accessible for baby, instead of putting the mouth right on top of the nipple when you're trying to position. Some other things to look for is rocking motion. A lot, once baby is trying to suckle, it's hard to see what's going on the inside, but for a trained eye, what we look for is a rocking motion of the jawline. And it kind of imitates what the tongue is doing. It's rocking back and forth, drawing the nipple back towards the back of the mouth so that it's not painful, but also allowing milk to come out. Mm-hmm. And they're not having to use as much suction power, which means more energy if they're having to do that. That can make baby sleepy. If it's a chomping motion, or what I call the Maggie Simpson, it's not comfortable and it's not efficient for baby, and it can make them more tired, especially if they're dealing with something like jaundice, or if they're premature, they're using more energy trying to get energy out. And so that's not a good latch. So that's why it's so important. It's why we talk so much about what makes a good latch, because there's so many different factors involved and so many things that it can lead to if it's not corrected.
How do you help the baby and you figure out? I really couldn't figure out how to get Scott, my oldest son, to latch. So is there any like little tricks that you can use to help the baby,
Yeah.
or yourself, maybe?
Absolutely. That's such a great question. So if we take just the cradle position, for instance, I have a little poem that I remember from training years back. And I try to teach it in my breastfeeding class too, but it's tummy to mummy, nose to nip, flex the hips to open the lips. And what this does is it encourages that deeper latch, and it's more comfortable positional wise for mom as well. So the tummy to mummy aspect is we're getting the arms out and away from baby so that it's their chest and tummy are up against you. There's nothing that is going to add space between their mouth and your breast. And they need to be up against you as closely as possible, which can make it hard to see what you're doing, but it's going to initiate a much deeper latch opportunity. The nose to nip is kind of going back to that asymmetrical positioning. If I put baby up too high in that direction, then they're going to have to tuck their chin to open their mouth, and that's not conducive to a deeper latch. If I just do a simple shift in the other direction and put it right at their nose, there's a little instinct there, a little reflex, just like getting kicked in the knee and your leg kicks out. If they have something right there at their nose, they go and open really wide for me. Almost all babies do it. So putting it right there at their nose and they're up close to you, they open nice and wide. And then flexing the hips has to do with supporting that lower back, giving them something to push off of, and just supporting the lower spine so that they're comfortable and can focus at the task at hand. So some of that goes out the window when you're so focused on getting baby to attach that some of the other things kind of go out the window, that it all really makes baby more comfortable and more conducive to latching properly. There are going to be some anomalies out there that are going to make it impossible, even with everything else that you're doing on your end. So we think of things like tongue tie, lip tie, things that are genetically involved, like high palate, things like that. That's going to make it harder, obviously, for them to attach properly. And why that is, especially with things like lip and tongue tie, that has to do with extra skin tissue in the muscles that they're having to use to move properly. If they don't have the freedom to pull the nipple back where it needs to go, it's going to stay in the front of the mouth and make it hard to even keep the nipple in their mouth. So they'll even spit out a pacifier or not even use a bottle properly when things like that are happening.
So those are obviously speak with your physician about, and our lactation consultant as well.
Exactly. If you're kind of going down that route, you're going to need some extra help. It's not anything on your end, most likely.
So it's a lot about positioning, really, to get a good latch is, you have to really focus on the positioning. So let me ask you something else, and it's a little last week, but it's always a big topic here for us because we're dealing with the breast pumps. And I'm posting a YouTube video about the Motif medical breast pump. But what I think is really interesting about the pump at Motif is the flange. It's more rounded and it mimics the shape of the breast, which I think is, you don't really see that. I think that's just, it's so easy to overlook, but it's a really nice feature. But one of the biggest questions we get is flange size. So how do you recommend, and I know that these things change over the course of the time. And we have a lot of moms that, sometimes they want to order different size flanges before the birth event. And what I've learned and what I've heard from lactation consultants is that that's all going to change, as you progress through your breastfeeding journey.
And that is very correct. You're going to be a lot more swollen. You're going to have a little bit more fluid retention, especially right after giving birth. So if you're needing to pump right after birth for some reason, you may have to deal with that. Plus, when your milk regulates a few weeks down the road, you're a lot of times when we tell the body, yes, we're going to utilize this lactation feature and provide breast milk to our baby, sometimes our body will overproduce. And so that'll make our breasts bigger for the first few weeks. And then it realizes, oh, we're only feeding one baby, and we'll get a little bit smaller. And so that once again changes sometimes the size of the nipple area, the size of the breast. But one thing that I do like about Motif's version of the flange is that contour aspect. It does help with that fit just a little bit better, so that if there is a subtle change, hopefully you get a little bit more use out of it if there is a slight size change difference there. But one thing
size is, and we get this question sometimes as well. This is the flange, right? And then this is the little tunnel part. I always refer to it as the tunnel part. This is the measurement, right? That you should, it's not, you're not trying to, this varies a little bit between different manufacturers, but this is the size that you want to make sure. So what do you think, what's a good guide to know it's fitting correctly right in here?
So once again, we're looking at it just like a good latch. We don't want it just up on the nipple. If the nipple is rubbing too much, it is too small. And if it's sucking too much breast tissue in, it's compressing, and you're actually going to be blocking the channels that's releasing milk and not getting milk out that way as well. Plus it's probably painful or uncomfortable, to say the least. One little tool that I learned from a colleague of mine is to do the I love you sign. And this is to indicate the size of your nipple. And the pinky is a 21, the forefinger is a 24, and the thumb is about a 27 or a 28. So you can kind of get an idea of where you're at. And of course, there's going to be some variances within that, but I think that's a good starting point, and it goes with you wherever you go.
Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh, I love that.
There's tools online, but some people don't have the means to print something out or buy something. But this goes wherever you go, and you can easily do a comparison and kind of get a rough idea of where you're at if you're needing a different size.
Well, we have a question from a Kellen. She says, what do you recommend if your milk doesn't come in or have a low supply? How do you know if you have a low supply? That's always a big question too. How much milk am I getting, or what's normal?
And
Thank you,
unfortunately,
Karen.
it's a very loaded question because there's lots of variables within that. You know, how far along you are in the breastfeeding journey. Milk coming in is a big thing. We'll just start there, since that's the first part of the question. Milk coming in, you should have milk already called colostrum, and you make that in your second trimester. And it's produced by the hormone progesterone, which is our pregnancy hormone. It's produced from the placenta holding your baby. So it's producing this very concentrated milk, and it's available as soon as you deliver. It's very thick. It's not going to come gushing out. And a lot of times you're not going to have that really heavy fullness that we anticipate having the very first day. It usually takes 3 to 5 days for your actual mature milk, what we think of milk, to come in. And some people haven't even introduced the breast to their baby because of that, thinking there's nothing there to give. But what will get that transitioned faster is putting baby to the breast anyway. There's still something really, really good there, something really concentrated and yummy for them, just waiting. But sometimes it can be delayed if you've had a C-section, if you've had a lot of swelling, hypertension, other factors that would cause some kind of fluid retention that can sometimes hold things back a little bit. Things like not very well controlled diabetes, or diabetes that maybe have become out of control for different hormonal reasons, that can sometimes play a role. Hemorrhaging can sometimes delay that as well, because we need iron for blood flow and nutrients to feed that. And so we have sometimes an anemia induced poor supply. So if you've hemorrhaged to the point that you need a transfusion, or you're on iron supplements, that might be an indication of why you're maybe having some difficulty there. But of course, you want to assess that properly with a trained lactation professional to see if it's really you, or if it's really maybe something more on baby's end of things, being maybe sometimes we associate not having supply if baby's not latching and feeding well. If there's no milk coming out, doesn't mean there's no milk there to be had. Maybe baby's having a hard time. And this can induce a low supply issue. Supply issues in and of itself is a loaded thing, because there's so many different variables. And I know I've said that, but I cannot emphasize that enough. It's talked about a lot because there's not a lot of good information at the ready for moms to kind of get a good grasp on. Number one, what is a good supply? What indicates low supply? And is it low supply to begin with? You know, sometimes moms will go into it not realizing how often they have to feed their baby at the breast. It's not as scheduled like if you have to bottle feed. It's designed for a good metabolism, so it's going to be slow, often, and small feeds, small frequent feeds. And so that can be a big shock if they're not expecting that, and they may be thinking, wow, I didn't even get 2 hours out of that feed and they're already acting hungry again. Do I have a low supply?
Yeah.
That happens.
I remember
so much.
My son, both of them would cluster feed at night.
Yes.
Right. And my husband would come home from work, and he's like, are you going to do anything else except for nurse the babies? They just want to eat forever, like 2 hours at night. It's just, it's unbelievable. But
if you have even like the smallest seed of doubt, that just spread fertilizer all over that too. You know, somebody says you're feeding again.
You know, he was great about it, but it was a learning process for both of us.
Cluster feeding is a great term you just used too. A lot of people have no idea that even exists. You know, usually around the second, third week of age, cluster feeding begins, and people are, what does that even mean? They're already feeding all the time.
Yeah.
So once again, they second guess their supply. So it could be a perception of low supply, but I really, really say that with no condescending emotion behind that. You know, it is truly poor information or lack of information being given to moms to truly know what to expect when breastfeeding. Even if they've taken a class, sometimes they're still not getting a grasp on what it actually looks like. And if you're a first-time mom, the anxiety levels are through the roof anyway. You want to make sure you're doing everything right. And it's really easy to start doubting yourself and your abilities. Low supply is usually an induced thing. It's not usually something that just happens for no reason, or that there's just something wrong with you. Every once in a while you get a hormonal issue involved. Every once in a while it has to do maybe with breast size reduction or something like that, where we've altered the tissue. But even that doesn't happen as often as you may think. It's usually an induced problem. And that does not lay blame on mom necessarily. It has to do sometimes with the medical situation that they may be in. Maybe they've had to have some separation from their baby, and not responding well to a pump because it's not cute and cuddly like a baby. And there's definitely a hormonal aspect and emotional aspect to breastfeeding. Sometimes it has to do with maybe being told to be put on a block schedule, or feeding schedule of some sort, or to sleep train. And so when you're going long stretches, 4 or more hours between feedings, there's a protein that builds up that tells the brain not to make as much. And so over time, you make less and less and less and less.
Oh,
so in that, sorry, go ahead.
That's interesting. I was what I was always told, and this was, I have a 10 and 13-year-old, is it's just on demand.
Right.
Breastfeed on demand. So sometimes it seems, like, but sometimes you don't know what the crying and you're trying to figure it out. So it's like, just feed the baby. So,
right.
But, eventually it works itself out and you learn. It's not, we don't know how to do this. So I always tell moms, listen, don't be hard on yourself. Like, learn how to do it and just relax, and you're doing the best you can, and your baby's going to know that. And,
right.
If you learn to relax a little bit, I think that's part of the problem. But we have another question. Are we measuring the flanges? This is from Melissa. Are we measuring the flanges before or during pumping? I don't understand the rest of the question, but when would you measure for the proper size flange?
But you could do it at either point, to be honest with you. I think you get a better idea if you're actually pumping and seeing how the nipple stretches into the flange. And that way you're able to see, does the nipple touch the walls of that tunnel we referred to, what we're actually measuring for. Sometimes at rest, we look very different from when we're actually pumping. And I'm sure there's different opinions that are, that's not like a clinical research type answer, but it's more of a practical answer. Look at it before and during your pumping, because during the pumping session is when it's going to be most crucial for that to fit correctly for you. If it's rubbing a lot or compressing a lot, it's not the right fit.
Okay. Well, that's great. I think, the moral of the story is relax and enjoy it. I loved it. It was my favorite thing, but also get help, because there's so many resources out there nowadays. It's amazing. And, that you guys, the IBCLCs, thank you for everything that you do. And it's so appreciated. So thank you for joining us. And I guess the call to action is, if you want to check out the Motif Medical breast pumps, go to their website, motifmedical.com. And they do have some resources, but they also work with Ashley too. So if you have any questions about breastfeeding, you can certainly reach out to them, and you can ask more questions on Facebook, and we'll go ahead and circle back around and comment. But thank you, Ashley, so much, and stay healthy. And we'll have to do this again maybe next week. Yeah.
Oh, yes. It sounds great. Thank you so much for everything you're doing. And thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Take care. See you soon.
You too. Stay well.
Bye-bye.